Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. And if you listen to this show, I bet you also know you can get it as a paperback, an audiobook, and the ebook is free. Free to download whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. For information about me, the books, plus more importantly, thousands of interviews with literary agents, authors, editors, publicity professionals, all the world's best people, head to middlegradeninja.com, access the entire back catalog of the show. It will change your life. My guest tonight is none other, I couldn't be more excited. We are talking with Rajani LaRocca. Rajani, how are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing excellent, and I should take a moment to let esteemed audience know that we are experiencing a slight delay. I will do a little bit of editing and post to fix that up, but esteemed audience also knows I hate editing, which is why I leave so much of the show in place. So we'll see what happens.
It's okay. We're just going to have to deal with it. It's okay.
My first question is always, esteemed audience knows I never summarize another author's book, and I never summarize another author's background. So if you would give esteemed audience an overview of your background.
Yeah, so I'm an author, and I'm a writer, and I live in the Boston area, and I was born in India. I immigrated to the US as a baby. I grew up in Kentucky, not far from where you are. And then I moved to the Boston area for college, and I've been here ever since. And I knew at a very young age that I wanted to go into medicine. So that's what I studied after college. And obviously I went to medical school and residency. And it wasn't until decades later that I decided to go back to writing. And I'm so glad that I did.
So by that time, you'd already graduated from Harvard College, Harvard Medical School. Were already practicing medicine before you decided to start writing seriously?
Yes, that's absolutely true. I was practicing medicine for over a decade before I went back to writing and started taking some writing classes. And I have to say that this path, this kind of meandering path to writing, has been a really good one for me. I feel like I rediscovered it at just the right time in my life. My kids were a little bit older. They were in school. I was more established in my medical practice, and it was a good time to be creative again. And I have to share a story that I share with kids at school visits, which is that when I was in high school, I loved writing, and I was in a creative writing class in high school. And I told my teacher, I said, Mr. Hertzfeld, I really love this, but I know I'm not going to write as my career. I know that I want to go into medicine. And he said to me, who says you have to choose? And the next day he brought in all these books from the library that were by authors who happened to be doctors. And it totally planted a seed in my head. And that seed started to sprout decades later. And so I'm very thankful that he listened to me and kind of helped me keep my mind open to the possibility of coming back to writing. And one last thing that I have to say about this story is that when I went back for a high school reunion, when I went back to Louisville to my school, I knew we had sold my first book, and I knew it was coming the next year. And the first person I ran into, I literally got out of the Uber and at my school. The first person I ran into was my old teacher, who was, retired, but he still came back for reunions and saw all the alumni. And I said to him, oh my goodness, you're in my book. And he looked at me and he said, well, I hope I'm good. It was actually a line that he used in our creative writing class that one of the characters in my book says. The line is, poets need time to stare out of windows. And even way back when, he was trying to tell us that that time when you seem to be doing nothing, when your mind is wandering, is not wasted time. That it's just really important time.
And of course, as soon as you saw your huge advance for your middle grade novels and your huge advances for your picture books, you thought, well, why did I ever waste time at Harvard Medical School? This was where I was at, right?
Oh yes, absolutely, positively, yes. We all know that the way to get rich is to be a writer for kids.
That's where all the money is. I assume that every author I've ever talked to on this show is all about the material wealth that this job provides.
Absolutely.
So 10 years in to being a doctor, and you decide now it's time to start writing. What brought about that sudden shift? Because I know you'd always been a big reader, right? Did you kind of wanted to be a writer, but obviously I'm assuming medical school does not leave a lot of time left over for writing. So what prompted this change, and why specifically did you want to write for children?
So here's the thing. I always loved writing. That didn't necessarily mean that I wanted to be a writer. And because to me, I enjoyed the process of writing, but it wasn't necessarily linked to getting published, at least when I was younger. And then, after 10 plus years of being in medicine and having kids, I poured kind of all my creative energies into the kids and hosting great birthday parties and stuff like that. And I kept reading. I was part of I think 3 different book clubs at one point, and that was wonderful. And so I've always loved books. And I didn't really think about writing them until I got to this point where I was like, I need to rekindle my creativity that isn't only about birthday parties. So I said, well, I used to love to write, why don't I just start writing again? And for me, as somebody who has always loved school, the first thing I did was, well, how do I take a class so that I get to be with other people and have somebody guide me and teach me something? So my first writing classes were through writers.com, and that was great. And at first I didn't know who I wanted to write for. I thought to myself, I want to write novels. I am a novelist. I'm going to be very serious. And it became very obvious very quickly that I wanted to write for kids, because I think the books that mean the most to me, even nowadays, were books that I read when I was a kid. The books that stick with me the most, the books that I remember, the books that really kind of shaped who I am and what I think about the world. I read them when I was a child. And that's not to say that I haven't read wonderful books as an adult, that there aren't books that I love. There absolutely are. But the ones that were most important to me, that just spoke to my heart the most at an important time in my life, were the ones that I read when I was a kid. So then I started taking some in-person classes at a place called Grub Street in Boston. And I met in person some writers. And that was the secret sauce in my writing life. I was like, oh, I've met other writers and they're kind of awesome. And we started, forming critique groups and exchanging writing. And when there is somebody that you really like a really awesome friend who is saying, well, what happens next? You got to tell me what happens next. And I need to know, then it keeps you writing. And initially for the first couple of years, I would say that I was really I wasn't really worried about publication. I was just I'm just writing and I'm having fun and I'm just creating something that is from me alone. I'm just doing something because I enjoy it. And then I took some more classes, including a KidLit survey class. And I never really intended to write picture books, but then we read some picture books and kind of thought about them in this class. And I was reminded of how much I loved picture books when my kids were little, and what kind of qualities I loved in a picture book, which was sometimes distinct from the kind of qualities that my kids loved in a picture book. But that's the way it goes sometimes. So then I started writing picture book drafts too. I was like, why not? Just keep going. And then, as you have to hold on to that joy of writing and like why you're writing and what it gives you for a while, because the path to becoming published can be a long one. But because of friendship and just, people that I really respect and think are awesome as critique partners, I kept going.
So if you met a group of jerks, I might not be talking to you tonight.
That's right. But I have to tell you, I really have yet to meet anyone in the KidLit community who is a jerk. Everyone is pretty much like kind of wonderful and generous and, enthusiastic and, lovely and creative. I have to say that when I went to medical school and then residency and started practicing, I thought to myself, these are my people. Like medical people are my people. We're on the same page. We have the same goal. We are all working towards the same end, which is to take care of people. And I never thought I would find a group of people like that again. And then I met writers and I was like, oh, these are also my people. These people are awesome. We're working towards different goals, but like still have the same kind of fun attitude about it. And it's been lovely. I never expected to meet some of my best friends in my 40s.
Well, the nice thing about having written now so many books is that even if you never write another thing again, you've got a ticket to the club. You can go to conventions forever, and you'll always be able to meet new writer friends.
Yeah, that's right, but I need to keep writing.
Well, knowing how many books you've got coming out over the next 2 years, I don't think there's any danger that you're going to slow down. But if you chose to, you've got that leeway. You're in the club.
Awesome. That's good to know. They don't like kick you out of the club, right? You're still allowed in the club.
So eventually, you go on. You become represented by Brent Taylor at Triada US. How long does it take to get from where you start writing seriously to where you get that offer of representation?
About 3 years.
That's not too bad at all. Was that just a standard query, or did you meet him out and about? How'd you go about finding your agent?
Okay, well, get ready. Are you ready for a slight fairy tale story?
I love a slight fairy tale story.
Okay. Here's the deal. In 2014, I drafted my first novel. Then I revised it and I thought it was awesome. And I sent it out to agents. And while I got a few nibbles in terms of full requests, pretty much it was no. I was like, that's fine. I was like, I need to get better at this. So I kept revising it. Okay. And in 2016, I pitched it at the New England SCBWI conference as part of Pitchapalooza. And I had a really good pitch. I won Pitchapalooza and I got a free ticket to send this to a couple of agents and, a couple of editors on this panel. And then I was like, oh, wow, I need to make the novel match the amazing pitch I wrote for it.
Sure.
So then I worked on it some more. And in 2000, and it took a good 9 months or so. And I was like, this is it. This is really good. They're going to want it. So I sent it out to those agents and some other agents, and I got really great feedback, and I got really, high full request rate, all this stuff. And then, as often happens, nothing happened. I didn't hear from people. And I was like, and you're in this horrible state where you're like, I don't know whether I should nudge them or whether that's just going to prompt them to say no. And you're just like, whatever. So I just I just kept trying to query. And it was a really difficult time for me for lots of reasons. And I have to tell you that not hearing from people really was demoralizing because I felt like this novel was really, really good. And, but other stuff happened in my life. And I was in my kitchen one day and I was talking to my kids and I was like, I don't know why I am bothering with this trying to pursue publication thing. I just wish, I should probably just quit and just do my real job and not worry about this anymore. And my kids, who were, in high school or close to high school at that point, they said to me, Mom, we think your stories are really awesome. And we think that other people are going to think that way too. So you shouldn't give up. And I was like, fine. Like, after all my advice all these years to you to not give up on what you want to do, fine. I'm going to have to take your advice, right? So I just kind of like, was going along. And then there's this writing mentorship program called Pitch Wars. I don't know if you've heard of it. It is for novelists. So it's for people who write middle grade and YA and adult. And the idea is that somebody who's more experienced, like either authors or editors or booksellers or whoever, more experience in the publishing industry can mentor writers who don't have agents yet. So I submitted my novel. I was really, waffling about this, but one of my friends, my critique partner, said, what do you have to lose? Even if you don't get in, you've still got, agent interest in this. Like, but if you do get in, maybe this is an opportunity to make your book that much better. And maybe that will be the thing that, pushes you over the edge. And I was like, fine. So I entered, and to my amazement, I was selected as a mentee. I think there were 180 of us, and there were like over 3,000 applicants that year. I had the perfect mentor, this amazing writer named Joy McCullough, and she loves Shakespeare. She has a theater background. She loves Shakespeare. My novel, Midsummer's Mayhem, is basically a middle grade take on A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's influenced by A Midsummer Night's Dream. And she had great advice. She loved my book. She loved my writing. And her big advice was to get rid of a main character. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I mean, talk about killing your darlings. I was like, okay. So I was like, I hear what you're saying. And then I was like, but I don't like, but he's so funny. And she's like, there are other ways to, bring the humor back into this. And I was like, fine. So I was so terrified that I started 2 different revisions, one with him and one without him. And within 3 chapters, I was like, he's got to go. So this book that I had worked on for 3 years, I rewrote it in 5 weeks. Like, I had to rewrite basically every scene because he was in almost every scene. And I was like, okay. And I got to tell you, it was way better. It was way better. So at the end of that mentorship, which was about 2 months, there is an agent showcase. And agents basically read a little short pitch in the beginning of the manuscript. And then they comment, like in a blog, they just comment and say, send me the whole thing or whatever it is. And so I did that. I got a bunch of requests, and I sent them, we had to wait until that whole thing was over. The day that I could send them, I sent it at 5 p.m. And the wonderful person who's going to become my agent literally replied right away saying, I can't wait to read this. And at 8:30, he emailed me and said, we need to talk. I absolutely love your book. And I was like, what? And I literally ran around my house going, and my daughter was like, what happened? And I was like, he wants to talk. And she was like, well, you need to reply to him, don't you? So we talked the next day, and that was it. And that was the beginning of awesomeness. We sold Midsummer's Mayhem and 4 picture books that year, the first year we started working together.
Wow.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk more about that. It occurs to me that I should quickly remind esteemed audience, so that they can receive some of the same wisdom you received, that they can listen to author Joy McCullough on this very show. Check back on episode 68. We had a wonderful conversation about all things writerly. And Mr. Taylor, if you're listening, come on the show and we'll hear your advice as well. And now you are a Pitch Wars mentor yourself, right?
Yes, I have been a mentor with my friend Remy Lai, who is also a middle grade author. We've co-mentored for the past 3 years.
And so that brings you that joy and satisfaction that you're going to help somebody else achieve that same running around the house moment.
Yes, it's absolutely. I feel like we want to pay it forward because we received so much from the whole Pitch Wars mentorship, but also the community. We made amazing friends. Like, I am still really good friends with so many people from my Pitch Wars group. It was amazing. And I will say this much as a mentor, because we make this clear. look, we cannot guarantee that everyone is going to get an agent and a book deal out of this. Like that's not something we have any control over. But what we can guarantee is that you're going to become a better writer, that you're going to learn how to revise, that you're going to know how to read an edit letter and what to do with it, and you're going to have a stronger manuscript by the time your mentorship is over. And I should also add that you're going to make a whole bunch of friends. And I'm talking about mentee friends, but also like your mentor friends, because literally I can't let go of any of my mentees. I'm like, we're still friends. Tell me what's going on with writing and not writing and all that stuff.
You just build a whole community. Good for you. Good for writing in general, and good for all the authors that are receiving that benefit. So aside from the obvious thing, write a good pitch, write a good manuscript, what are some of the most common mistakes that you find some of your mentees making that you can help them correct?
So I will say, for when we're choosing mentees for pitch wars, we're under some time pressure, right? We're talking about like a 3-month window, basically, that we get to work with someone. So it's not a lot of time. And so for us, especially, we're looking for people who know how to write. So the things that we can fix plots. We can fix, tweak your characterization to make sure that you're explaining things correctly. We can help you figure out your character's arc, and they're starting here and they're ending up here, and like how did they grow in between. But we don't have time in 3 months to teach somebody how to write. So what I would say is that working on the craft of writing, like a sentence level craft, understanding what the purpose of a scene is, kind of understanding, even if you are a pantser, so somebody who doesn't like to plot ahead of time, after you've written something, how do you then figure out what the plot should be? You don't have to know it ahead of time, but you should know it when you're revising. Just like basic skills, all that stuff we learned in school that some of us didn't really like, including grammar. Those things matter. And because those are the things that if you're already a really good writer, we can help fix all the rest of it. But we need people to be at that level where that the person can handle the kind of feedback that we're going to give.
So I want to talk. Midsummer Mayhem, and then Much Ado About Baseball, the newest one. Before I do, I have this burning question, because I know that you're a doctor, and I read a blog post you wrote for a Writer's Digest about the overlap between being a doctor and an author. And I had talked with Dr. Susan McCormick, who was on episode 117, esteemed audience. Make sure you check that out. And she had told me something that I so love. And we were talking about that feeling of when the muse speaks to you, whatever that is, whether it's your self-conscious or whatever, you're working hard on a manuscript, and then an inspired idea comes to you. And she said that by practicing writing, I'm going to misquote her, so that's why you need to go back and listen to the actual episode 117, esteemed audience. But my best recollection is that skill that she developed as an author came in handy as a doctor, because she'd be thinking about her patients and how to prescribe the best care for them. And she'd be looking at their information, thinking about them, and then same process, out of almost nowhere, the muse would speak to her and give her some advice on how to treat those patients as well. Do you find that to be true?
I definitely think that writing makes me a better doctor. I also think that doctoring makes me a better writer. I think that both of these careers, both of these professions, require keen observational skills, but not just observation, being able to draw conclusions from what you see and feel and hear and smell. So there's that. I think that, as you just alluded, everyone thinks of writing as this kind of art that like a thunderbolt hits you and suddenly, War and Peace comes out of you. But we writers know that yes, there's art to it, but there's also craft, and that you spend years and years and years developing your craft and honing your skills, just like you do in medicine. And that when the muse is eluding you, that you can rely on craft, that you can just sit there and go, okay, I don't really feel particularly inspired, but I know how to plot. And I know how to like make, set up a scene, and I can just do that and plod through it even when it doesn't feel good. And then eventually you get back to the place where it feels good. Similarly, medicine, while it is a science for sure, there is a lot of art to it. And, a lot of the art in medicine has to do with listening. It has to do with listening to the patient in front of you and what they're really trying to say, and really trying to get at the heart of that, because you can be the most brilliant doctor. If you do not address what your patient is worried about, you have failed. So that's, important. And then the other thing is, yes, there is sometimes an intuition that is talking to you, saying something is wrong, or I think it's this, or it doesn't seem like this, but it seems like it should be. That if you listen to that voice, you can sometimes figure out something much more quickly than if you just went through and plodded through your checklist of things. So, yeah. And I think most importantly, both writing and medicine are at their heart about people. And I love people. I love the people that I meet and that I get to, interact with and learn about. And I love the people that I make up in my head. And the closer I can get the emotions of the imaginary people to reflect real emotions of real people in the real world, the better my writing is.
I was just thinking that there are some fictional characters that I have cared more about than actual people I have known in reality.
That is so true. And I also feel like when you're into a book and you are aching when it is over because you're like, I want to spend more time with those people, there is nothing like that feeling. That is just such an incredible feeling. And wow, the idea that I get a chance to have readers of my books feel that way is pretty amazing.
So you're a primary care physician.
Yes.
And I assume you're one of those part-time type doctors that only works about 5 to 10 hours a week and the rest of your week is available for writing, or are you working a little longer than that?
So I'm in the office 3 days a week, but I still have to kind of deal with messages and all the stuff, follow up on things and everything the other days. But I do try as much as I can, except when I'm on call, I can't do this, but I do try to set aside some time each week just for writing.
So when you're starting, you've got the two kids, the son and the daughter, that are going into high school and repeating your advice to them back to you to inspire you and keep you going. How many hours a week are you working, and how are you carving out time amongst that work and your family time? Plus, I assume you occasionally wanted to watch a movie or a television show or read a book or something. What does your schedule look like? How are you carving out your time to write?
So not every week is the same. I would just say, as a working mom, you have to just learn to like fit things in when you can fit them in. So, when I was still driving my kids around to like, sports practices and piano lessons and stuff like that, I would just bring my laptop and I would just be sitting writing, or I would dictate in the car on my way to work. I would just find time, little pockets of time. And so I don't have a specific ritual. I don't have to be in a particular place. I don't have to have, perfect circumstances. I just have to have something to write on and write. And I almost always write on my laptop because I'm a doctor and I can't read my own handwriting. So That's the only thing I need, really, is some sort of electronic thing that I can write on. And, things have changed since I got my agent and I started selling books, because once you start selling books, then like your revision to your editor is due at a certain time. Like you can't just like, wander the earth for a while. And, before all that happened, literally nobody was waiting for me to write anything. So I could take as long as I wanted to. And, but I set myself little deadlines so that I would have something to work towards. I would have a critique group meeting and I'd be like, okay, I have to submit this to my critique group, so I need to get it ready. Or I would go to conferences and I would get critiques for those. And I would have to, I would have a little mini deadline there. Or I would set an artificial date on the calendar and be like, I need to finish it by this time, because like, then I'm going on vacation and then this and that. And like, I'm going to be busy. So I would try to create little mini deadlines for myself. And now the deadlines are already there. I just was committed to writing as much as I could. I wanted to make my novel the best it could possibly be. And I wanted to write as many picture books as I thought were good as I possibly could. And so when I signed with my agent, he signed me for my middle grade novel, but then I also had 5 picture books that I thought were ready. So that was like part of, my plan, is that I was just like, I'm not going to lament how long it takes. I'm just going to be prepared for when it happens.
Well, it sounds like the perfect approach is working out for you, because I was looking over your release schedule, and at some point, for any publicist or anyone else who's listening and wondering when we're going to talk about the book, we will absolutely talk about Much Ado About Baseball, which released June 15th, 2021. The esteemed audience can go ahead and be pre-ordering it right now. But in addition to that, you've got what, like 5 picture books coming out over the next 2 years?
Yeah. So I had one book in 2019 that was my debut, Midsummer's Mayhem. I had one book in 2020, my debut picture book, 7 Golden Rings. And I have 6 books this year. So I had a novel in verse, Red, White, and Whole, that came out in February. I had a picture book, Bracelets for Venus Brothers, that came out in April. Much Ado About Baseball, just released on June 15th. That's another novel. And then I have 3 picture books in August and September. I have Where 3 Oceans Meet, which is coming from Abrams on August 24th. I have My Little Golden Book about Kamala Harris. Like, that's amazing that I got to write that. That's August 31st. And then I have The Secret Code Inside You, All About Your DNA, which is a rhyming picture book that explains the basics of genetics to little kids, coming September 14th from Little Bee Books.
I meant to ask you that book about Kamala Harris. I know that you're an ardent Trump supporter. So was that strange for you to have to write that? But no, I'm teasing.
It was the absolute honor of my life to write that book. I'm so excited for it. She's such an amazing, amazing human being.
And that one releases when?
August 31st.
Gotcha. And so to the person who's unfamiliar, it would seem like, wow, you must write like a book a minute. You must have just had an incredible stretch there. But of course, we're looking at many, many years' work, and I'm assuming there is a manuscript that wasn't able to find a home. Of
course.
For how many books did you have to write before you came to Midsummer Mayhem?
Okay, that was my first novel. That's the first novel I ever wrote.
That's impressive.
Thank you. I feel very lucky. But I did work on it forever.
How long did Midsummer Mayhem take you?
I first drafted it in 2014 and I signed with my agent in 2017.
Gotcha. And then I'm assuming, was he able to sell that draft, or did you have to rewriting it?
We didn't have to do a ton of revision with him because I had literally just revised it in that 5-week crazy spurt with Joy. So it was in pretty good shape, but we did some minor revisions, and then and I didn't have huge revisions with my editor for that one either. So that was good.
What did that luck continue? Are we talking another 3 years to get to Much Ado About Baseball, or did that one go a little bit faster?
it went a little bit faster, but it was also super challenging to write. It was really hard to write. I knew kind of what there's some magical people in Midsummer's Mayhem that may or may not be from A Midsummer Night's Dream, and they're kind of, there's a magical competition going on, and I knew I wanted to write a book about the other side of that competition. And I had this idea about because the magical people in Much Ado care about sports and they care about math and science, whereas the magical people in Midsummer's Mayhem care about cooking and baking and music and art. And as we know, all the children in these stories know that all of these things are important, but the magical people seem to take sides. So I wanted to write about Team Salty, which is, the sports and math people. And I had this idea for dual protagonists, a girl and a boy, who are both math competition rivals, and they find themselves on the same summer baseball team, and they have a history. They don't really like each other, even though they have so much in common, but they have to find a way to work together because they're on the same baseball team. And then there are magical math puzzles, and there are mysterious snacks that may or may not help their baseball team. And once each of the kids gets a math booklet and with fun puzzles, and once they start solving them, their horrible baseball team that could not buy their way to a win suddenly starts winning and winning and can't stop winning, basically. But then the kids get to a puzzle that they can't solve, and something bad happens, and then they've got to figure out, can they find the ultimate answer that is promised in these math books, or are they going to strike out when it counts the most? So it was hard because I had never written anything from dual points of view before. I had a really hard time at first figuring out how to make these characters distinct from one another and yet not make one of them like unlikable, because they both are likable, but they have their own issues that they're not, they don't reveal to each other until much later. And then for the life of me, I could not figure out what the heck the magical people wanted. And so I was sitting there going, I don't know, like, why are they doing this? So honestly,
perhaps the plot. No, I'm sorry.
The way I found myself through this story was to write a synopsis.
And that's not standard practice for you. That was that a new experience?
It was not until this book, because I was like, I hate synopses. Like, you're taking my beautiful story that has so much nuance and you're boiling it down to like nastiness, like just like, and then this happened and then that happened. But I'm telling you, I was like, if I can write a synopsis that makes sense, then I can write this book. So I wrote a synopsis that made sense, apparently. And then I wrote the book almost exactly, like I wrote the book and it followed what I said in the synopsis. So I was very proud of myself.
Obviously, for both of these books, you are you're not borrowing. You're just you're repurposing a little bit of Shakespeare here and there. Clearly, we've got a bit of a Beatrix. Is it Beatrice and Benedict thing going on?
Yes.
How much do you feel it's strict to do a 1-to-1 to Shakespeare's version? I mean, do you have to get right down to here's the appearance of Don John, or can you just take what you like and leave the rest? And does that help me with your synopsis if you just follow the play?
Okay. So I knew I did not want to do a straight retelling for both of these books, for Midsummer's Mayhem and Much Ado About Baseball, mainly because middle grade readers in general have not read these books. They have not read Shakespeare's plays. So what am I even, like, what is the point of retelling them for them? I wanted to take inspiration from those plays and tell a different story. So Midsummer's Mayhem is about a girl who loves to bake, and she is the youngest of 4 in a big Indian American family, and she feels a little bit lost and forgotten in her own family because all her siblings are much older than her and they're really awesome at all the things that they do, and she feels like she's not that good at anything. Then she learns about a new bakery that is holding a kids baking contest, and she feels like if she could just win that contest, she can finally prove that she is not the least talented member of her family. But then she meets some she listens to this strangely familiar music coming from the woods behind her house, and she follows that music into the woods, and she meets a boy who also loves to bake. And so together they kind of bake up all kinds of interesting treats. And then everyone around her starts acting really weird, including her dad, who is a food writer, and he's supposed to be helping her bake, but he can't tell the difference between delicious food and disgusting food. So basically, it is inspired by A Midsummer Night's Dream. The framework has to do with A Midsummer Night's Dream, like what is really going on. But the story is about this 11-year-old girl who wants to feel special in her own family.
I love the idea that your reader will eventually read the actual play and then just throw it down like Shakespeare ripped off Rajani.
But the same thing happened with Much Ado About Baseball, which is the heart of that play to me is the delightful antagonism between Beatrice and Benedict, and how they're clearly meant for each other, but they can't get over themselves to be together without some trickery from their friends. And so similarly, Trish and Ben, you caught it, right? Beatrice and Benedict, Trish and Ben, they both love math and they both love baseball, and they should be friends, but they just can't get there without a little help from somebody else.
And of course, because this is middle grade, we're going to see a wonderful friendship that blossoms rather than marriage and happiness forever.
Yes, no marriage in this book, at least not between these two.
Well, maybe you'll write a sequel where you catch up to them, 10 years later, and we'll see. And I had read someplace that your three favorite Shakespeare plays were Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, and The Tempest. So obviously my next question is, are we going to see your version of The Tempest at some point?
All I can say is I'm working on it. I would love to write a book that's based on The Tempest. And I've got some ideas. They're all swirling around. It's been a little bit of a crazy year, but I'm trying to get my head together on that. So yes, I'm trying.
You ever see yourself maybe tackling like, I don't know, tragedy, Macbeth, the middle grade version or anything like that?
I think of all the tragedies, the Shakespearean tragedies, that is probably the one that I might be able to tackle, just because like you could make it very cartoony and the witches are really cool. And, maybe if you don't have death, maybe if it's just like selfishness and greed, that kind of thing, I could get away with it, but we'd have to see.
Fingers crossed. I hope you find a way to do it.
Thank you.
Or heck, give Chris Marlowe some love, whatever. So with this series, I had a couple of questions and they've gone right out of my head. This is riveting podcasting. My apologies, esteemed audience. I did want to ask, because you had said that the theme in Much Ado About Nothing, or Much Ado About Baseball, is finding your team, friends who are going to stick with you even when you're not sure you want to stick with yourself. And you needed your team as you struggled to bring the book to life. So you leaned on your writer friends who gave you strength and encouragement and read draft after draft. So what kinds of things did your writer friends do that gave you the strength to finish this off?
First of all, they told me it wasn't terrible. And I think they were telling me the truth. I think honestly, sometimes you're in such a bad spot. So I joined a new critique group when I was in the throes of trying to figure out what to do with Much Ado. And I basically, had been like, I met one of my writer friends and I wasn't in her critique group yet. And I was like, I'm really struggling. Whoever said I knew how to write a novel, they were mistaken, because I clearly don't, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing and I am lost. And she's like, why don't you just join our group and just see, just maybe some fresh perspective. Let's see what happens. And I was like, sure. So I showed up and, I gave them sample chapters and everyone had really helpful things to say. So first of all, they said that it was not terrible, which was really helpful because I needed to hear that, because I was like, oh, what if it's all bad? And I just needed to forget it. So then they, we talked about some of these things, like, they didn't know the whole story yet. And they were like, well, this character is coming off as really unlikable, and like, we're not like, why would we root for him, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I need to clue people in a little bit earlier, like what is going on with him in his head, and like, why is he sad, and like, why is he cranky all the time? And then I went back and forth. Like, I tried a bunch of different things because it was dual POV. It was very hard for me. And I was like, maybe it should just be one character or the other character. And then I tried a few chapters like that. And I was like, no, like, clearly the other character's perspective needs to be in here because it's just not the same story and I don't like it. So I hashed through all of that. Once I got that, like, once I was like, fine, it's going to end up still being dual POV, girl and boy. That's it. Then I just like sat down and thrashed around with the synopsis and sent them the synopsis to critique, and was like, this is what I think is going on. Like, what do you think? And that they helped me with that too. So it was great. And it was nice joining a new critique group at the time, because none of them had ever read any of this. So it was all brand new to them. And sometimes that's the other secret when you're stuck with writing. Sometimes you just need a fresh perspective. And many times that means time. So like, literally put it away in the drawer. And then like, when you come back to it a few weeks or months later, it is like, oh, I can see where the problem is and I know how to fix it. Or people who have never read it before. But the other fake out thing that I do when I don't have people who've never read it before and I don't have time, is I change which program I'm writing in. I usually write novels in Scrivener, and sometimes I will just like put a bunch of stuff in Word and start writing in Word. Sometimes I will change the font, or I will print things out and it will give me a new view, literally, on my manuscript.
Change the font. It's a whole new book that you're looking at, huh?
Yeah, I think it just fakes out your brain enough that you're like, oh, like, it isn't the same story, is it? Oh, now I see what part is really boring. Cut that part out.
It was fooling me in Helvetica, but in Times New Roman, there's no hiding.
There's nothing. There's no hide. And when you print it, oh God, I would like write notes to myself in the margins like, this is awful, stop it.
Real helpful, supportive stuff.
Put a big X over a page. Just don't need this page. Go away, page.
And so when you're finding these new critique partners, had you already published Midsummer Mayhem?
Yep, I was. Well, it was in the works. It was probably a few months away from being published. So I knew I had written one novel that somebody wanted to publish. The question was, could I write any other novel that anyone would want to publish?
Well, now I'm assuming you're working on something new that we can't yet talk about. Do you have the confidence going into that now, 2 novels behind, or is it still, nope, I have written 2 novels, yes, but I forgot everything I learned and I'm right back where I started? Where are you at in terms of confidence at this point?
Okay. So this is going to sound ridiculous, but it is true. We all know, we writers who write novels, that every novel is a different journey, right? It's not to say that some are easy, although some are easier than others, but they're just different from one another. And with Midsummer's Mayhem, like I said before, literally no one was waiting for that book. Like, I could have taken 20 years and no one was going to be crying. It was fine, With Much Ado, I kind of was like, I want this follow-up. Like, I want to have another novel that is in this world. And so I was like, come on. Red, White, and Whole, my novel in verse that came out in February, that book, like, I swear, that book showed up in my head and demanded to be written. That book, I couldn't work on it immediately. So I had like one day a week when I was allowed to think about it. And then when I turned in my draft of Much Ado, I wrote that book and it poured out of me in like 6 weeks. It was crazy. It was like being possessed. And it was hard in many ways because it was emotionally very challenging. It took a lot of emotional bandwidth, and it was great. But it was also just like, oh my goodness, this is either like one of the best things I've ever written, or like nobody is ever going to want to read it. And so that one was a very different process. And because it was written in verse, I didn't write it in a linear fashion. I wrote it as moments and thoughts and poems here and there. And I just wrote them all. And then afterwards, I went back and put them in an order that I thought made sense. It was a very interesting process. I mean, I definitely had an outline, a very loose outline of what happened, but the rest of it was just moments and emotions and images and imagery and things that I wanted to repeat and motifs and all that kind of stuff. So that was a totally different process too. My next book with HarperCollins is coming next fall. And right now it's called Switch. We don't know if that name is going to stick. And it's about twin musical sisters. So another dual point of view book, very different from the rest. And that was, I had this premise, I started writing it, and then I was like, okay, this is really hard. But I'll tell you, in terms of confidence, I knew that if I just kept writing it, I would figure it out. And I wrote, like, I was on a deadline, and I wrote 20,000 words in, a certain amount of time. And then in the last 2 weeks, I wrote another 20,000 words. And it was just like, and they were probably the best 20,000 words. It was just like, boom, it just fell out. And so I think what I would say in terms of confidence, getting back to your question, is that I have more strategies now for getting through the parts which are difficult, because especially when you're writing a novel, I mean, it always gets difficult at some point where you're like, oh God, this premise is bad, or like, what am I doing? Or like, I'm this, like everything I'm writing today is awful. I have learned that you just have to keep going and let it be awful. And then honestly, in retrospect, you'll look back and you'll be like, maybe some of this isn't that awful. So now I've got I've got three novel ideas that I'm trying to wrap my brain around at the same time. So I'm going to pick one of them and just go in on that one. And then we'll see where it leads. But yeah, so it's always an adventure. I have more confidence now because I've done it many times. But it's always a different journey for each book.
Well, I've seen you describe yourself as a plantser, which I love that term. So do you have some things that I know every novel is its own journey. I wrote 3 Brannekers. Each one was harder than the last, even with the same characters. It's a different process every time. But do you find that there are some things that you consistently do? Do you usually know your ending in the middle? How much of a plan do you usually start with?
So strangely, I usually come up with a premise, and I, at least for the 4 novels, well, the 3 novels that have been published, I knew the last line, weirdly. And then what I typically do, like nowadays, now that I've gotten some writing experience, is that when I outline the big plot points first, and then I work from there. And then I do a lot of character work in terms of I don't focus so much on random things. Some people fill out these character worksheets where it's what's their favorite ice cream flavor? What's this? What's that? I don't do that. I kind of try and do some exercises, trying to describe the person in an unusual way, or think about what they're trying to hide, think about what they're proudest of, think about the things that they love, think about their biggest fear, and try and make sure that happens, those kinds of things. And then I try to figure out where to start the story, and I'm better at that now than I used to be. And write a few chapters and see what happens. And so this is where the planting comes in, is that I have a plot. I know kind of my plot points, and then I go and fill in other plot points too. Try and figure out what the bad guy or the antagonist is, trying to do in the meantime. But then when I write a scene, Sometimes I just write a scene and let figure out. I mean, like I have a goal for the scene, but I kind of write and see where it takes me, and surprising things happen. So that's the pantsing part of the plantsing, where like I don't know exactly what is going to happen in every single scene. Sometimes I think something like one thing is going to happen and something completely different happens, and I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of awesome. And then I go with that, and I'll see what happens. And as long as and so then I just write a full draft, and as long as when I go back to revise, as long as those scenes feel like they make sense and that they're interesting, I keep them. But if they don't, then I just get rid of them.
You get rid of them forever, or do you keep them in a file where you can go back and look at them occasionally?
Here's a secret. I always keep those scenes. I always keep those pieces of writing. I have never used them. I've never dug them out and used them for anything. It's just that like it's like this weird thing where it's like I need to save this because I actually worked hard on it, and like I don't want it to go away, but I never use it.
Well, one day the visitors to your official library will be thrilled that that's all been saved, because they can go through that and piece that together, write long master's thesis about it.
Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. I know. I don't know. I mean, thank goodness we write in electronic form, right? Because like they can be saved and it doesn't really take that much space. If I had pieces of paper that I was trying to save, like my husband would literally just incinerate them. He'd be like, you have a book, why do you need all this extra stuff? And I'm like,
Now I've got a shelf right over there that still has drafts of stuff I wrote from high school that I should burn, and I haven't.
No, when your library is out there, people are going to want to read that stuff.
So I'll look at it like, oh, adolescent me thought some very different things. This is not, I hope no one ever reads this, but I'm still not going to throw it out.
No, don't do it. Don't throw it out.
So, well, obviously, thankfully, you debut in 2019 when the world is just fine. It was fine. But then you've got a book that comes out, and you've got a picture book in 2020. You're launching here in 2021. I saw that you did for Much Ado About Baseball, you were able to do a virtual launch with New York City Bookstore, the Books of Wonder, and Chris Barron, who also had a novel coming out. How have you been able to launch your book amidst this whole pandemic type thing that's been going on? I don't know if you heard about that, being a doctor and all, but how has launching in 2019 pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic, how has that differed, and where have you found the most success to be able to get the word out about your books?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay, so first of all, I have to say that so much of publishing is very opaque. You only find out about like how many books you sold like twice a year, right? And that's like the official number, right? Your publisher will tell you how many books have sold because you've got to calculate royalties. Okay, so knowing that, which is kind of hilarious in the 21st century, that we can't have like real numbers, like real-time numbers, but that's fine. It doesn't matter.
Why would you want to be incentivized in that way?
So just knowing that, I decided a long time ago that I need to not worry about like actual sales. I'm here to write things that I love and that I hope other people will love, and get the word out, just because I love the stuff that I write, and I also love the stuff that other people write. So I want to like shout about books that I love, right? So that's my goal. And then the other thing is that because I write for children, I can't like contact children, like that's not right. So I want to connect with the people who can get books to children. So that includes booksellers, of course, and librarians and teachers. So the wonderful thing about launching in 2019 was that I got to go in person to lots of things. So I had an in-person launch, and then I had a big party at my house. I had a ball, and I got to go to meet booksellers at their conferences. I got to visit schools and do school visits. I got to go to nerd camps, which are kind of like educator camps where they invite authors. I got to go to those in person. It was awesome. And I got to go to bookstores in person. Like, that was fantastic. I had such fun. And so the great thing, in addition to like meeting people in person, and like, I mean, I had baking contests and bookstores and libraries. Like, we had a ball. Like, I got to meet all these kids. They were so wonderful. They baked creatively. They asked me fantastic questions about my book. It was just such a joy. So the great thing about all of that was that it, like, fills up your heart. It's like, oh, like, it's so great that when you get to meet the kids who read your book. But the other thing is that I get to make all these connections with bookstores and libraries and teachers. And so when the world shut down and it was just crazy COVID times, I had a virtual book launch for my picture book, and lots of people got to come, even people who were across the country who would never have been able to come to an in-person book launch. And I still got to do school visits, and I still got to, do nerd camps virtually with teachers and librarians. So, and part of it was because I'd already made connections. Part of it is because I was in a book promotion group that we have wonderful people who are all looking out for everyone and telling each other about opportunities. And part of it is because, like, we just had to. Like, what else were we going to do? So it's been okay. I have to say, so the first, I had 2 books earlier in this year, and they were both virtual launches, and that was great. It was, it was fine. But after a while, it gets really tiresome being in a room alone by yourself looking at a screen. So for Much Ado, I was lucky because enough people were vaccinated. COVID rates were low enough. We had an in-person outdoor launch with my local bookstore, the Silver Unicorn Bookstore, and at a park where there were kids playing on a playground. It was awesome. And then we had a party at home, and then I got to do a virtual launch as well. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. And I think that during the pandemic, when everyone was just alone and scared and dealing with all kinds of things, writing helped me, and books helped me, reading helped me. And so I held on to that. I think I bought more books during the pandemic than I have ever bought in my life during a year, because I was just like, I want to keep bookstores going. I'm going to keep, like, if I thought about it, I'm going to buy it. I'm just going to buy a book from you. That's fine. And like, now I have a giant, stack of books that I need to read, which is fine. But which is my usual state of being, only multiplied a little bit. It's fine. So yeah, so it's been not always easy, but it's been wonderful in many ways. There's been a lot of wonderful connections. I've been shocked at how beautiful a virtual event can be. I've been surprised with how much emotion people allow themselves to express over a screen, but it has happened, and I'm grateful. And so I'm always grateful that we're still able to connect to each other, and that we all still need books, even in these times. And now that we're coming out of them and things are getting better, I hope that we keep both things. I hope we go back to in-person things, but I hope we keep some of the virtual stuff, because it means that lots of people from lots of different places can still participate.
Yeah, I would love to see if most book launches have some virtual component as well. Yeah. Why wouldn't you want your fans from Indiana or from wherever to join in?
Yeah.
But selfishly, just focus on Indiana. Those are the fans that matter the most.
I'm going to keep going back to Louisville, so I'm going to have to like drop by Indiana one of these days. So I've been to Ohio and I've been to Kentucky, and my daughter's at college in Nashville. So like, hey, why not?
Oh, you'll be all through the area then.
Yeah.
So, well, all conversations sooner or later seems like lead to the pandemic. So before we move on, because I want to ask you about publicists, about some of your school visits and all the wonderful stuff you're doing to market the book. But going through the last year, which maybe it's just better forgotten. Maybe it's better not to talk about it. But being a doctor and being informed about what's going on with the virus, does that lessen your anxiety, or does that increase your anxiety as you're experiencing it? Or is there any way to know, since you had to experience the whole thing as you?
Oh, that's such a great question. I will just say I'm lucky because I work at Best General Hospital in Boston, and I'm just lucky. I feel fortunate because some of the people that were on the forefront of thinking about this epidemic and how to treat it, once people had it, and like what the approach should be to practicing medicine, to everything, are at my hospital. So I was very proud to be, part of that organization. I feel like after the initial scrambling, terrifying time in March through like early May of last year, I felt like we had a plan to keep people safe. And we went back to seeing patients in person starting in June in my outpatient practice. And I had worked in the respiratory illness clinics that were, like the places where we put anybody with respiratory symptoms went there, so that everyone would be suited up and, would be safe and we could do swabs there. And then they didn't need people from other practices, after a while, which was really comforting because it meant that the numbers were going down and they were able to, man these facilities more easily. So I don't know. I think that it was a scary time, but it was always heartening to see people pulling together, just see people working so hard on behalf of everyone, and once the vaccines came out, I mean, that was just a very incredible process to be a part of any of that, helping to encourage people to get it, helping to schedule people to get it, all that kind of stuff. It was very exciting and exhilarating because that, we got to see in real time in our lifetime what can happen when science gets it right, so that was really thrilling and heartening to be a part of, and just you can see some of the best of humanity come out in times like that. That's not to say that this year wasn't really, really hard. It's been a very, very difficult year. And that includes 2021. It's been a very, very difficult year. So I don't know. I think all of this stuff is it's an opportunity for everyone to reflect on what they love the most and what they care the most about, and to try and focus on that more as we go forward. Because no one, you couldn't have told me in 2019 that this would have happened. I never would have believed you. I would have just been like, that doesn't happen. But it did. So now that we've, are coming through a pandemic after all the loss that we have all suffered as a world and as a country, how do we take the good things from this experience? And there are a few good things, we learned about what we could let go of, and we learned about what was essential. So how do we hold on to what is essential and just keep that in our focus as we go forward?
I remain increasingly optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but I reached a point where I short-circuited somewhere in there. And then about January 20th of this year, when everybody was officially signed in, and again, I apologize because I know you're an ardent Trump supporter and don't want to hear this, but once the politics were settled, okay, we survived. As improbable as that is, I think there's going to be an after this. Yeah. Well, what matters most now that we're all living on borrowed time? What's the thing I most want to write? And that's what I've been doing this year. I'm not writing anything about politics, pandemic. No, I'm writing the happiest little tacking animal story you ever saw. Just following my heart. All right, for however long I got, this is what I want to do now, and it puts everything in perspective in a way that will probably last the rest of my life, certainly, and probably the rest of the lives of most people listening to us.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. I've always heard people, and this has happened to me too, when you write what is in your heart, what your heart is telling you to write, it always leads to good things. Always.
Your mouth to whoever's ears. I hope that is so. But you know what? The writing itself is a good thing. The joy of the story is plenty reward enough.
It is. It is. It really is. I love it when I make myself laugh when I write.
Do you make yourself cry also?
Or when you make yourself, I love it when I make myself cry when I write too.
I always feel a little bit guilty. I love it, but I never want anyone to walk into the room at that moment because I'd have to confess what I'm doing.
No,
I have deeply moved myself.
Yes, yes. There were times when I was writing Red, White, and Whole that I was sobbing, or I was literally not even writing a scene. I was thinking of the scene, and I was like in my kitchen chopping vegetables, like sobbing. If anybody asked me, if anybody asked me, it was just the onions. That's it.
Well, if it doesn't move you, how is it ever going to move your reader, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So after the joy of writing, obviously, this is a product. You got to market it. You got to get out there in front of it. And you are, I must say, are doing just an absolutely fabulous job. Not just because you're on this program, which wonderful move, but I saw that you've been writing articles all over the place. For I think I saw a Teen Vogue on there. I saw Writer's Digest. I saw that you have been on. I saw that you got mentioned on the Today Show. I saw that you were. What's the name of that swell cooking show? You were making cupcakes and talking about your book on.
Oh, KidLit TV.
That was fantastic. I very much enjoyed that. I didn't know a show like that existed. I'm going to start watching that more regularly.
They are awesome. I had a ball. They have a segment where you're in the kitchen, and oh my goodness, I had such a great time.
And I know you've got a wonderful publicist who could have been nicer at TBS Media Group. And then I saw also that you've got a relationship with, what are they? The book groups that book school visits?
Oh, yes. Booked authors.
So how many people do you have working on your behalf, and how did you go about? Well, no, this. I want to know how you're in the empire building business, and everybody listening and me, we want to be with you. So how do you go about finding these people to assist you in evaluating them?
Okay. So, all right. So I'm in an unusual situation in that I have multiple books coming out with different publishers. So some authors, and I think this is true, especially if you write in like one category of book. If you write middle grade novels, you usually stick with one publisher. I mean, you can change, but a lot of times people are with the same publisher kind of longitudinally. And I wrote a lot of books, and we sold a lot of books to different people. And so I ended up with this year, 2021, where I was going to have 6 books with 5 different publishers. Yeah. So every time you have a book with a publisher, you get a publicist who is assigned to you. And depending on the size of the publisher, your publicist may have a lot of time for you because there aren't that many books coming out per season, or they may not have a lot of time for you because they've got like 50 books coming out and they gotta they've got to do publicity for all of them. So but the publicists at publishers do a wonderful job. They do, and the marketing people do the heavy lifting in terms of getting your book to the review people and into bookstores, and like all that machinery that you really don't ever see. They put a lot of work into it, trying to get your book in front of different people's eyes. So that's awesome. But because I had 6 books coming out in 1 year with 5 different publishers, I figured I needed somebody else in terms of publicity to kind of help me figure out my entire career overall. And so that's where I went with Tracy Von Straten, she's just amazing. And she's basically like a consultant, And so we talked for a while, and I said, this is my situation, and this is why I think you might be wonderful, the right person to help me. And she's been fantastic, as you know. And then in terms of what was the other question?
Oh, it was a long, sprawling, impossible to answer question, which is what my trademark. Want to break down a specific, and if you don't want to answer a specific, we'll just cut this part out. But was she recommended to you, or did you go publicist shopping? How did you decide she was the person?
She was recommended by another author who was in a similar situation, and so then I reached out to her, and then we had a conversation to see whether it was going to be a right fit. Yeah.
And school visits, because I saw you've got somebody booked.
Oh, yes. So I was approached by them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I was approached by them. I think that one of the things that I mean, I don't know. I'm actually not good at this, so I don't know. I don't know how or why they found me, or why they decided I thought I would be a good fit. But I think we had a conversation also about like what it would mean to like sign with them. And it's Allison Hickey is the person's name. She's lovely. And basically it's helpful to me, obviously, because it's just one more avenue to connect with schools and teachers. But it's also helpful to them because, I'm a person with a lot of books, and I write for different age ranges. So I guess I'm an appealing author to some schools, because like if they take me on, I have books that fit little kids and like medium-sized kids and older kids. So I guess that's helpful.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They can get you around the whole school.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm basically like, kindergarten through middle school. I've got it covered.
Well, I saw on your website, and this is publicly available, so I don't feel like it's like it's off the table, but maybe it is. Maybe we'll edit this part out. Who knows? But I was looking at some of your rates for visits, and you can do a full day, up to 3 presentations of 1 hour each, plus author lunch. That's $1,500. You've got a half day visits, $800, or you'll do a 1 hour visit. That's $100 or free with the purchase of 10 or more books. Did you decide those rates? Were you consulted on that? And when you're a doctor and presumably you're giving up a day out of the practice, does that really make it worthwhile? This has got to be a thing of love, right?
Yes, it's so here's the thing. You have to balance that you just want to like be in schools and like talking to kids. And that it helps your books with like, so it's not just being a doctor, it is taking time away from writing. This is time that I could be writing. And so that's the whole thing. So it's just got to be worth it. And for me, basically I'm hoping to incentivize people, if I have to travel, like, and do this in person, to just book a whole day, because it basically, even if you go for a half a day, it's your whole day. You're not going to go home and like write War and Peace. After that, you're just going to be tired and fried. So yeah. So yeah, that is and believe me, I don't like asking anything of anyone. Like, I don't like, it makes me very heebie-jeebie, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put rates up there because authors deserve to be paid for their time. And I figure I might as well just be upfront about it, and I don't want my time to be devalued, and I don't want fellow authors' time to be devalued. I want to make sure that, the time that we take away from our other duties and our writing is worth it.
I assume even if money were no object, but ensuring that they pay, that they've got some skin in the game, make sure that they're set up and they're ready to receive you and have a proper visit, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, we all know this as consumers. If something is free, we don't think it's that valuable.
Except for Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, which is available to download free now.
For free. That's super valuable. Clearly.
Now pay me for the sequels. We'll be good. I'll get you money eventually. Don't even worry about it. It's okay. The esteemed audience knows that sooner or later I'm going to ask. It now seems like the perfect time. Have you ever seen a flying saucer and or a ghost?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I've seen either. Doesn't mean that they don't exist, but I have not seen either of them.
Gotcha. And when I ask that question, just for any future guests listening as well, don't be sitting on your Bigfoot story and not volunteer it at this point, just because I didn't ask. If you saw a leprechaun, a genie, whatever, I want to hear about it. But so far, no supernatural experiences then.
No, not beyond my own head. I definitely dream about these things, think about these things, but I've not seen one in real life.
And of course, you write a lot about magic. Any belief that there might be something to it, or it's all just fun and games?
There isn't magic in the way that I write about in the real world, but there is a more important type of magic. Honestly, I think that human beings and what they can create is the most magical thing I've ever seen. Like, we tell stories that take us to other places. Like, we're the only, organism, at least I think, that we know of that does this. Maybe the dolphins have an incredible oral tradition that we don't know about, but as far as I know, we're the only ones that write it down. And that is forever going to be the magic for me, is story creation, and how we as humans from the beginning of time have told stories, and that we're going to keep telling stories until the end of us, and that there are so many common themes and so many things that seem to come up over and over again, that seem to be told over and over again, but there are just endless ways of telling them. So that is the magic to me.
What's your favorite reader reaction to something you've written?
My favorite reader reaction is when a girl came up to me and said, I read Midsummer's Mayhem 5 times in a row, and I wanted to keep reading. So, like, can you just write the next one really quick now, please? I was just like, oh my goodness, bless you.
I should also ask you about the STEM Women in KidLit podcast. So what is that, and where can esteemed audience tune in after they've listened to the entire back catalog of this show?
So the STEM Women in KidLit podcast is a podcast that I do with my friend Artemis Rarig, who is also a KidLit author, and she works in entomology. So we both have STEM backgrounds and ended up working in KidLit. And so that's who we interview. We interview women with some kind of background in STEM who are authors or illustrators or both in KidLit. And we have a ball. So we talk about kind of like their STEM background, their education, and what got them into writing, and whether they have STEM in their writing, and kind of their approach to thinking about writing and STEM. We have the best time, and people can listen basically anywhere you can find podcasts. You can find our podcast, and there's a lot of me giggling. I'm just going to apologize in advance for that, but there's just I giggle a lot because I have such a great time.
I like hearing people giggle on podcasts. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe everyone else is gnashing their teeth. But I like to hear that genuine engagement.
Well, I have a great time. It's always really fun.
And I'm watching our time, and I see it's all flown away. And where does it all go? It just flies when we're having a good time. My last question, but thank you so very much for making the time to be here tonight and for sharing all of this information with the esteemed audience and with me. It has been an absolute pleasure. And you're going to be writing. I mean, you've got the entire catalog of Shakespeare's plays to cover versions of. So I assume we're eventually going to do this again with a future book. But for tonight, where we'll end it, my last question is always some variation of, if you could go back to any point in your writing career, wherever you like, and give yourself some advice that would have made a difference for you and might make a difference for everyone that's watching or listening to us, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I would tell myself that writing is such a roller coaster of a journey, that the highs are about as high as you could imagine, and the lows can be really low, and to keep going. I think that's it. I mean, and I did, here's the thing, is that even at the point when I felt at my lowest and I was just losing patience with everything, and I felt like I was going nowhere, I kept going, because of my children, of course, but also because I just have an innate stubbornness about me where I'm just like, I'm just not going to give up. I don't give up. So I would tell myself at those points, because there's not like there's just one point. There are like multiple times where you're like, oh my God, what am I even doing? Right. To just keep going and just to write whatever I wanted to. And that I would and maybe just give myself a hint. Because I think also that like in all the movies where you like know the future, it's all really bad. So I wouldn't really want to know the future, but I would tell myself that writing what was in my heart was never going to let me down. And that means like whether something is published or not published, the act of writing something you care about is worthwhile in and of itself. And the rest of it, we have very little control over. So we should just we should let go of that part that is like not controllable and just focus on the things that we can control, which is us. That is the only thing we can control, is you, the writer. So I would tell myself that when the times were rough, to just focus on the part that I could control and take joy in it, and let the rest of it go.
That's the perfect note to end on, although I can't resist reminding esteemed audience to go back and check out Hugh Howey's episode where we talk about how little control you have even over you. Rajani, where can esteemed audience find you online, follow you on social media, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so my website is www.rajanilarocca.com, RajaniLarocca.com. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Rajani LaRocca, and I'm on Facebook as Rajani LaRocca Writer, I think. And I'm on Clubhouse. I think it's R LaRocca on Clubhouse.
And esteemed audience, you know who I am. Go to middlegreatninja.com. You're going to see the back catalog of the show, read every interview you would ever want to read. Everything good in this world is available at middlegreatninja.com. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. And God willing, I'm alive. I'll see you next week.